Hello, I'm Dr. Brandt Gibson, and a couple days ago, I got the privilege again of holding my grandson. He's the first. I expect to have others coming, hopefully many more, as the father of 11 children. But the idea is I get to hold him, and he's a couple months old. He's getting to the point where he's rolling over, and I started thinking about the fact that a lot of individuals don't understand exactly how we learn to walk. This is a process. An infant, a newborn baby, and so forth, of course, are not doing much. But the interesting thing is within weeks of them being born, if you were to take them and hold them up, there's a simple reflex that happens where the baby's legs will push down against hard surfaces. And that's natural. That's part of growing. That's part of getting strength. And a lot of times, over the next several months, they'll progress to crawling or scooting. And the idea is it's creating strength in the muscles, creating a connection, for lack of a better way of saying it, of the brain to the muscles of the legs and hands and so forth. So you can actually get the motion that you need to start moving towards locomotion or being able to move. Somewhere around 4 or 5 months, you'll be able to balance the child, holding them up, and you can balance them, keeping them from falling over, and they're strong enough to hold their weight up. And so they'll actually rest and push, and a lot of times they'll start bouncing, and most of the time they're in heaven. They think this is the coolest thing ever as they're doing this motion. Again, you're increasing strength, you're increasing the function where the nerve signals are being sent correctly, so you can actually get the motion and so forth, all in preparation, a maneuver that's going to help with standing and help with walking. Somewhere around the 7-8 month mark, the children typically will start to stand with the aid of furniture. So they'll pull themselves up on furniture and they'll use furniture to maneuver, and they can start to progress from there to start cruising, where they're using furniture, using the walls, using things to get around. And again, what this is doing in the legs and feet is very important. One, it's creating muscle memory and muscle education, so that the muscles actually are accommodating surfaces, and they're able to feel the difference between balance, between leaning forward, leaning back, and so forth, and you're actually starting to get that strength. I have a brother that was walking at 9 months. So this is not a hard and fast rule. Some children will progress faster, some will progress slower. Some individuals will crawl, some individuals will not. I have a daughter that walked first, crawled second, because she found out crawling she could get around faster than when she was just learning to walk. And so she switched to crawling because she could get around faster. Interesting thought. But it's really part of getting them around. Somewhere around 9 to 10 months, a lot of children will start to working on bending their knees and moving, as opposed to just kind of scooting around or cruising around is what we call it if they're standing up. And that's when they start to do it, where you can actually hold their hands and they'll actually start to walk, start to move. Again, there's things that are happening. The muscles in the feet are starting to develop, and they're actually learning and growing. That's why most of the time I recommend that they not wear shoes when they're cruising around the house or when they're walking around their house, because it allows the intrinsic muscles, or the muscles in the feet, to start to learn to accommodate uneven surfaces and start to move the way they're supposed to. And somewhere between 12 and 18 months, they will get to the point where they can actually walk, and they'll actually be moving around, and they can actually get pretty functional. And you'll see that they still don't walk a lot of times like a child does, or a teenager does, or an adult does. They usually walk with a wider base, wider stance, because they're still learning to balance. They're still learning to feel what we call proprioception, the pressure sensation in each of their feet, so they can actually tell the difference, and it actually affects the way they're walking. So as they get better, the legs move together, and the balance gets more normal, and they get quicker. And as this is happening, it's usually when they start to be more functional in a shoe, for example. Because the shoe is going to actually make it a little bit harder to walk a lot of times than in a younger child or infant as they're moving around. So the idea is to allow your child to progress at their rate and not feel like, oh, my child's not as smart because they're progressing slower. Each child is developing based on their muscle, based on their brain and nerve integration with the body. And the truth is, there is no correct way or correct speed. It's really just watching what's going on. Now, that being said, one of the interesting things, if you take a special note and watch, they're going to, as they get more and more normal, they're going to walk like one of their parents typically. So most of the time we tease individuals and say, okay, who'd you give your feet to or who'd you get them from? Because we walk like our parents or grandparents. And because of that, you can have some of the same issues and some of the same problems. And so as your children are developing and starting to walk, you may want to say, okay, which one of us do they walk like? And what are the problems you have or the problems that your spouse has that should be watched for or thought about in the long run to actually prevent some of these problems by possibly getting a child earlier into a custom orthotic or insert of some sort to change the way they walk slightly, so as their foot develops, as their body develops, it actually is developing more in a more ideal situation where the muscles and tendons and ligaments are all adjusting to the correct position, and then when they walk without the orthotics even, they're walking more like they should. This is Dr. Brandt Gibson. This is your podiatry tip, day 1. Is it 1?